GCTC and the audience. On behalf of GCTC, would like to welcome you all to the fifth episode of GCTC Manthan. The episode is all about India-Pakistan. Will the post-COVID world be different? We have with us today Ambassador TCA Raghavan. Warm welcome, sir.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Ambassador TCA Raghavan is a former Indian diplomat. He was 1982 batch officer of the IFS service. He has considerable experience in South Asia policies, issues, and considered as an expert on Pakistan studies, including heading the Joint Secretary, the Division of the Ministry of External Affairs in the Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iran Division. He was former Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan and High Commissioner in Singapore, Deputy High Commissioner in Islamabad. He is well-known author of two books. The first is entitled Attendant Lords, Behram Khan and Dur Rahim, Courtiers and the Poets in the Mughal India. His second book is entitled The People Next Door. Warm welcome, sir, again. We have with us General Rakesh Sharma. General Rakesh Sharma is currently a distinguished fellow at the class. He is also on the executive board of the GCTC. He retired as the Adjutant General of the Indian Army. He has commanded Fire and Fury Corps, responsible for Ladakh region of J&K. He has been research fellow at IDSA, and which is now Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, and is a fellow of National War College, Nigeria. He is commanded battalion in the Northeast, brigade on the western border, and division in the sensitive Duran-Akhnur sector on the line of control. Warm welcome, sir. We have with us Suhasini Haidar. Suhasini Haidar is the National Editor and Diplomatic Affairs Editor for The Hindu. Suhasini is also part of the advisory board of GCTC. She has covered the most challenging stories and conflicts from the subcontinent and beyond, including Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Libya, Lebanon, and Syria. Warm welcome, ma'am. We have with us General Muhammad Asad Durrani. General Durrani is a retired 3-star rank general in the Pakistan Army and presently a commentator and speaker. Durrani previously served as the DG ISI and former DG of the Pakistan Army's Military Intelligence. Welcome, sir. We have with us Ashraf Jahangir Qazi. Ashraf Jahangir Qazi has a distinguished career with the Pakistani diplomatic service. He has been the ambassador of Pakistan to Syria, Germany, Russia, China, India, and USA. In addition, the new United Nations envoy held various diplomatic assignments in the Copenhagen, Tokyo, Cairo, Tripoli, and London. We have with us again Kamar Chima. Salam, Kamar Chima sir. Kamar Chima is a strategic and political analyst. He teaches international politics in the Department of International Relations in Languages, Islamabad. Welcome, sir. Well, to moderate this lovely audience and we have with us General Syed Ata Hasnain. Syed Ata Hasnain is a member of NDMA. He was the GOC 15 and 21 Corps. General Hasnain is also on the advisory board of GCTC. I would now come General Syed Ata Hasnain to kindly take from here. General Hasnain, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aditya. What a pleasure. And I'm seeing that your verbal expression is all being converted into also a textual kind of a thing down below in the Hangouts platform. And I was very happy to see that when you mentioned General Hasnain, they actually called me General Houston. So I'm very happy that I'm now got a new name. I'm General Houston. of the United States of America, right? Anyway, thank you very much. What a pleasure to be here on this platform today. And Ramzan Kareem, Ramzan Mubarak to everyone on this program today. It's a pleasure to have such a high-profile panel, and I'm really happy and fortunate that I'm not speaking on this panel, because I could not compete against the intellect of this panel, and I was very happy that Aditya has selected me to moderate the panel, and that is a much better job for me. I don't have to sit and work so much harder than what the panel members would probably have done. Now, coming straight to the subject, firstly, the format. We've got the better part of about 2 hours with us. I have with me, I think, a list of about 7 or 6 speakers. No, there are 7 speakers. And if we have 7 speakers, and if we want to give about an hour to the Q&A, I propose that we should not be speaking for more than 8 minutes each. And that's the format which GCTC has normally been following in the past. After that, we will straight away switch on to the Q&A, which I shall moderate. I think the questions will keep coming out on the Hangouts message format, which comes on the right side, and I shall keep directing them to the concerned panelists. But before that, just a word on GCTC. It's my pleasure to say that I'm also a member of the Advisory Council of the GCTC, and Aditya, as the director, as the overall moving force behind this wonderful think tank. Actually, it has grown to be more than a think tank. It's a not-for-profit kind of an organization which has been put together by Mr. Aditya Tikku. And on that, we have a very, very large clientele of members from different walks of life. Not just the aspect of counter-terrorism, but almost every aspect of international relations, strategic affairs around the world, economics and geoeconomics, and many things like that. So, and it meets very regularly in Delhi. All this while, we have been meeting more physically than otherwise. But now, with the onset of COVID-19 and its subsequent threats that have been panning out around the world, we have now got on to different formats of virtual seminars, which is proving to be very, very beneficial for everyone, especially for those who have to travel far distances within Delhi to come to the center of Delhi to speak at the Nehru Center or places like that. Or I'm sure in Islamabad, similarly, the same kind of a thing must be happening in Islamabad, where people must be now enjoying perhaps speaking from the precincts of their own wonderful homes that you have in Islamabad. So, thank you, GCTC, for putting this together, and we are hoping that there will be many, many more such events coming together. What I can see is perhaps this is one of the first, or perhaps we may have had something before, almost like a track 2 event, where we have got speakers from both sides. Otherwise, normally, these events which we discuss India-Pakistan affairs have been one-sided, where we have speakers from India with a lot of experience coming out and giving out their views. But we have not always had the pleasure of having people from Pakistan joining us. And so that is a difference. And I hope in future we will have many more panels of this kind. Coming to the subject straight away, I shall be very brief. When I look at this topic, it says India-Pakistan relations, will the post-Cold War, or rather post-COVID world make any difference? Will it be any different? I start by saying that first of all, I think we are still in the era of the pandemic itself. We cannot be certain when the post coronavirus or the post COVID-19 era will really start. It could start maybe from the 3rd of May. It could start from October. It could start from March next year. So there is a high degree of uncertainty. What is certain is that in the middle of this, even while we are in the period of the pandemic itself, the relations between India and Pakistan haven't really changed in any classic way. We've had an attempt at trying to put together a SARC platform to have people discussing the threats from the pandemic, but it didn't really result in anything very major. Where there was reluctance on the part of Pakistan to join in any very big way. When Pakistan initiated their own platform to discuss it. There was not too much of a response from India. So the relationship seems to be going the same way. From my perception, the internal handling within India or any country, Pakistan, any country, the internal handling of a pandemic at the moment involves three major things. One is dealing with public health. Second thing is dealing with the economic situation. And the third is dealing with social harm, which is comes out as a result of the havoc which has been created by the virus. When you take these three things and translate them into the international environment, then it really works out to three other things which are closely related to these three factors. The first is health or medical technology, or the development of a vaccine for the future. How much of international cooperation can you expect on that? Number two is economically stabilizing the world. We've gone through 2008 and we had the famous downturn at that time. We have seen this happening in 1929. We've seen this happening, of course, in 1996 when we had the problem of ancient tigers. We had this problem in 1922. That is post the First World War and post the first major pandemic, the flu pandemic, when you had the Washington Conference also to try and discuss these situations, the situation, and try and stabilize international relations and economic affairs. And the third factor continues to remain the efforts of the world to bring about international stability so that things don't skew out of control. And obviously, we are finding that already, and probably that will continue into the post-COVID-19 period, you are having an intense standoff between the United States and China on one hand. You are having, we are looking at the potential of a development of a stronger relationship between India and the United States. We are looking at different formats emerging. We are looking at not really a new world order, but maybe some attempts to try and change things around in the new world order. So given all this, how does the India-Pakistan relationship stand out in that? We have not had the best of relationship in the recent past. And even as the COVID-19 virus hit us and the threat hit us, we have not had the best of relationship going. The signs were not very, very positive. So is there something good coming in or no? What are the factors which impinge on the possibility of improvement of relationship? Can we get together? Can we cooperate together to put our heads together to see what can be done, which can be for the betterment of the people of the subcontinent? That's what is all going to be under discussion today. And that's all from my side. I suppose the order of speaking will have to be, this is an Indian effort from this side. So obviously our guests are all from Islamabad. And I would start by inviting our senior most diplomat, Mr. Ashraf Jahangir Qazi, to come in and give out his intervention, maybe 7 to 8 minutes. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum, namaskar to all friends, many of whom I know personally, and I'm very glad to have the opportunity of meeting once again over the initiative taken by the GCTC. I just want to make sure, can you hear me? Because my picture can't come, but can you hear me?
Yes. I can hear you, sir.
Yes. All right. This is a very important sort of initiative that you have taken up, even though we are going through the COVID-19 crisis. And as you rightly said, General Sahib, that we don't know how long it will last. We don't know how great the ravages will be when we finally get over the worst of it. And the worst of it could be more than one pandemic. You know, there could be secondary pandemics, there could be other consequences, you know. But one thing is absolutely certain: the world will change, because at the most optimistic estimates are that it will still be the damage to health systems, economic systems, and the lives of human beings all over the world will be drastically impacted. So an environmental change will be very significant. India-Pakistan relations respond to this change. Now, India-Pakistan relations, you know, as you quite rightly said, have been very complicated, have never been sort of optimal, and there are deep reasons for this, justified or unjustified. but there has also always been a very strong segment of population which has always wished for a better relationship so that our two countries can, in tandem and in mutual cooperation, realize their potential. And we are a developing country. Our potential is huge. We've demonstrated the possibility of our going forward, but our relationship has been a major obstacle. Now, with regard to attitudes, with regards to issues, I think the past does indicate that while we have not managed to bring about a qualitative change or a quantum improvement in our relationship over the last 7 decades, there has been many a time opportunities to resolve or to make progress on very vital issues, including Kashmir, including Siachen, including the Sirk Creek, and then right at the end, things happen which then bring us back to square one. But the fact that we can make progress towards reaching some kind of basis on which more positive dialogue is possible has been demonstrated. They don't happen for various reasons on which we may agree or disagree, but given this, the trauma of the current situation, attitudes are going to change. Whether they change enough for leadership to have greater space vis-a-vis each other or with regard to each other is something we can hope for, and we should not cease hoping for, but we've also got to be realistic because narratives are in place and entrenched. Perceptions are in place and entrenched. We have mutually exclusive narratives and perceptions. How will we bridge this? There is, as I said, a certain segment of people who are able to transcend these differences and look at a broader picture, a broader vision of how to make it come, how to make it happen. For that, I think these kinds of conversations can, without taking leave of reality, can identify certain steps that we might consider and then in some way that's appropriate convey to our leadership, which are right now engrossed in tackling this immediate crisis. But as much as it's possible, we should try and communicate to them the possibility of reviving initiatives that had in the past shown some promise. Now, this situation which is confronting us is rendered all the more existential because it really is a subset of the much larger problem of climate change. Climate change may be slower, less immediate, less dramatic, but ultimately several times more dangerous than the current crisis. And then, of course, along with that, if we look at the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists and the major threats to human civilization, we've got to include the nuclear dangers and risks. All of these things are happening in the subcontinent and are affecting have affected the relationship between Pakistan and India. But the very fact that we have this kind of meeting taking place at such a time shows there is an intent to try and rise above the respective narratives and perceptions and to see what can bring us together. And I think there's enough dramatic things happening to convey to us that if we don't get our act together, then 1.4 or 1.5 billion people are either going to prosper or perish together. And we need, therefore, to sort of come up with concrete ideas which have a bit of vision and a lot of reality. And we've ultimately then got to find ways of approaching the leadership. And the leadership is also part of the political system and doesn't have all the space in the world. It's got to be it. But at the same time, if it accepts the fundamental vision and steps that we might recommend, then it will have a responsibility to try as much as possible to respond positively. So we need at all times to be very cautiously optimistic because the easiest thing is to cite reality and force on either side to suggest that no real possibility is likely. That may right now seem to be the reality, but we should not accept this reality as the whole picture if we are ever going to do anything. Thank you. what I heard was
Yes, yes, you were heard.
Kindly unmute your microphone, sir.
Sorry, I had muted my mic on instructions. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Ambassador Jahangir Kazi, Ashraf Jahangir Kazi, for your views. May I now request Ambassador TCA Raghavan to come forward and express his views. Ambassador Raghavan is at the moment the Director General of the ICWA, Indian Council of World Affairs.
Thank you very much, General. Good evening to you. Good evening to all my fellow panelists and to the GCTC members who are participating in this. Special greetings for the friends from Islamabad. Very nice to have heard you, Ambassador Kazi. Nice to hear your voice after a long time. Professor Chima, General Rani, good evening, sir. How are you? Nice to be in touch with you again. Thank you very much, Aditya, for having invited me for this discussion, and congratulations on putting it together at short notice. Let me begin by saying that a crisis has a dual nature. By its very nature, if one looks at crises historically, they present either opportunities or they intensify existing trends. And if you look at the COVID-19 crisis globally in South Asia, one can, at this point of time, see two possibilities. That it may throw up new opportunities, or it may intensify existing trends, which have already been mentioned by General Hasnain and Ambassador Kazi, all the negatives and the setbacks of the past. I don't need to recount that. What direction will we take, either in the direction of opportunity or in the direction of intensifying the current negative trends, is very difficult to say. I think as the moderator said in the beginning, we are at the beginning of this crisis. Somebody said yesterday, and I was really struck by that, you're in the first 10 minutes of a 3-hour thriller movie, and we are trying to predict the end. Nobody really knows in what direction the final post-COVID situation, what direction, what form, what will be the world we will have at the end of this in a few months, maybe in a year. But having said that, I think the purpose of this discussion was to see how we can move forward. All the issues are well known, the reasons for lockdowns, the reason for setbacks. Each country has its own menu of complaints, prescriptions, and to-do lists. I think to move away from that, I think the general issue, and Ambassador Kazi referred to this, I think one important takeaway which is going to emerge from the post-COVID, in the post-COVID situation, is that non-traditional security will receive a higher priority globally than traditional security. And I think if we move towards the ecosystem where non-traditional security issues have greater priority, India and Pakistan will find a great deal that they have to cooperate with. Now, the range of issues in non-traditional security are immense. They begin with economic development, and in South Asia, you cannot. The elephant in the room is economic development. But there are also issues of climate change. There are issues of environmental pollution, and certainly there are now increasingly so issues of public health and access to public health. So I think in an environment where we give greater importance to non-traditional security issues, India and Pakistan will actually find that they have issues to work on where they can work very well together. Now, one thing which is there, if one looks at the very bad history of India-Pakistan relations over the past 6-7 decades, that on the few occasions when India and Pakistanis work together, they actually work together very well. Now, these occasions have been very few and far between. But as I said, in an environment where non-traditional security issues have have acquired a greater prominence, perhaps these opportunities will present themselves to a greater extent, and we should be ready to grasp these opportunities when they come up. Because the old issues, it's very clear we will not be able to make progress on them uh, uh, if we focus on the issues themselves. There is no way that India and Pakistan can unify narratives or can evolve a common narrative on the issues which divide them. Those issues are far too fundamental. They are far too related to history and identity for diplomats to be able to resolve, or for experts to be able to resolve. So I think we need a new set of issues, and that new set of issues may in turn lead to an improvement in relations. And with that improvement in relations, possibly it will be uh, it will be more feasible to make progress on the traditional issues which have divided us so far. So I think if we were to look at portfolios, I think issues of climate change, public health, economic development, regional trade, water issues, glacial melt issues, all of those are factors which we can look upon more positively. But of course, that will depend a great deal on the kind of environment that emerges. As I said, there's always the risk in a crisis of past trends being intensified. People are talking about this crisis being of the scale of the Great Depression. The Great Depression led to a world war. It led to social change and political conflict of an order which we cannot even imagine today. My last point is that logjams in India-Pakistan relations have, oddly enough, always been broken by political initiatives. They have not been broken by analysis. They have been broken by political initiatives. And usually crisis create an environment for political initiatives. I hope that happens. And on that note, I will end and again thank all my fellow participants and old colleagues and new colleagues very much for being here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Raghavan. Absolutely disciplined and keeping to your time and making all the important points. The takeaway immediately, the aspect of non-traditional society, security taking primacy, the possibility that is beyond diplomats and beyond diplomacy, normal traditional diplomacy to resolve things, and that logjams of this kind and in such challenging times can only be broken by political initiatives. I think these are very, very important points, which will, I'm sure, be debated, and lots of people will question you on this subsequently. May I now invite from Pakistan, General Asad Durrani, to come in and make his remarks. I would also indicate, so that I can give you the order in which I'm going to be asking our panelists and the guests to be speaking. After General Asad Durrani, we will have Suhasini Haider from India speaking. At number 5, after that will be Mr. Kamar Chima, Dr. Kamar Chima, and then General Rakesh Sharma. And finally, we will have a special guest, Mr. Raza Syed from Islamabad. So over to you, General Durrani.
Thank you, General Stan. Good to be on this subject once again. I think someone did mention that it will all depend on in what shape we are once this virus leaves us. If we are all prostrate on ground, then of course that will be a different situation. We'll talk about it at that time, if we are still in a position to talk about it. But making an assessment as the most likely outcome, at the end of this crisis, both the countries will be at least in that shape where they can resume their good old or bad old days. That will happen. I think you probably also said that we will remain the same. In fact, they could get worse, and I'll come to that a little while. But why they remain the same? On that, my analysis or my opinion, my views have already been given in 2 books. I'm sure one or the other has been read by the audience here. And the thesis was that the Indian preferred option on India-Pakistan is status quo. Status quo suits it. It can manage it. It is the known devil. God knows, even if it were to improve for the better, what will happen. Would the dynamics be controllable or not? But that is all behind us. Right now, if that analysis still will be valid, then I can say that it will continue to be at least as it was, probably a little worse. And the reason is, as it is, I think all over the world, people like to find some scapegoat to blame their troubles. In other countries, I'm not going to go into it. In Pakistan, it is usually the internal, the various sectors, whether it's the establishment of the army or someone else. In case of India, all problems, all difficulties have to be put on the shoulders of the Western led Pakistan. That's the whipping, the old whipping back. So will that happen? I suppose we are not talking about any improvement. However, just 1 or 2 different points. I don't think I'm going to need all those 7 or 8 minutes. And one is about Dr. Raghavan's talking about non-traditional threats. Absolutely agreed. This is also what the strategy taught to us. If you are stuck somewhere, some other indirect approach to make the difference or influence the overall situation. Post-Bombay, some people like me used to say, well, now is the time we can talk about Afghanistan because the other bilateral things are going to not or no go or very good. Nowadays, if we can talk about the environment and the water and the pandemics, that might be a very good idea. And that is probably the only sensible way if we think that we can influence people from out, to influence the overall situation. The other, of course, is, and that is probably what we call the rider clause, always, the things only change when people are forced to change. That means the decision makers in India and Pakistan, once they have no other option, for example, virus has, put us all in the mat, and then there is no option. Or the public pressure has got to the extent where we say, now we can think of something. Till that time, no, nothing is likely to change. And I suppose both the countries can live with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Durrani, sir. Thank you very much for your wise words. In the order, can I now request Suhasini Haider to come in, please, in the remarks? Is Suhasini on board with us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll just wait for her.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, perfectly. And we can see you also.
All right. Okay. Thank you, General Hasnan. Thanks so much for inviting me, and thank you to the GCTC that really has pulled off a miracle. Aditya will tell you that when he first suggested the plan to me, I said, this has not worked for years now. And while General Hasnan did point out that there are track 2 dialogues that have been able to take place, there has been very little on the record that actually brings people from both sides together. Either we have what we see, which are the shouting matches on television channels, where we're almost unrecognizable on both sides in the kind of venom and vituperation that we see exchanged by both sides, or we see the leadership of both countries and the officialdom of both countries interacting with each other. So this is really a rare opportunity. And I have to say, as a journalist, we are used to being called the hawks in the room. But in fact, it's very interesting to me to hear that even the diplomats and the military officials who have spoken before me have not actually suggested that all hope is lost when it comes to India and Pakistan. Unfortunately, we live at a time right now where it would seem that very little hope exists that that the India-Pakistan relationship post the COVID crisis, and we are hopefully seeing an end to this crisis at some point, is going to be any different. Why is that? Because even while this pandemic has been raging through the world, India and Pakistan have exchanged heavy fire at the line of control. There have been infiltration attempts, according to our side, of 4 terror groups over the line of control as well. We have seen both sides sparring, really using every international fora and regional fora, the South fora, for a kind of petty sparring that was not expected at a time like this, but in fact it is. The fact that Pakistan's Prime Minister refused to attend the SAARC meeting called at India's initiative, but it was a meeting of the SAARC leadership, which every other SAARC leader attended. The fact that India has also chosen to downgrade its participation in Pakistan's meeting of the health ministers. The fact that even an issue like the situation in the Gulf region has ended up as a spat over Twitter, with India accusing Pakistan of trying to foment trouble and using what it calls cyber warfare over there, and Pakistan's accusations against India as well. And the fact that the one real brief flicker of hope, if you like, which was the Kartarpur corridor, because of the coronavirus, stands closed right now. We are looking at fairly grim times, and it would be impossible to sugarcoat them. So why do we think that it is necessary to pause, look at this moment and say, is there a hope for a future which is different from this one? I certainly hope so, because as Ambassador Raghavan has said, we don't even know how this is going to end, but we can be very clear that each of us is going to face an economic impact in the next year that we have not seen in recent times. In fact, most are suggesting that that every country in the world, but not the least India and Pakistan, will go back to times unknown in terms of GDP growth, in terms of where their poverty line will be, in terms of basic security and essentials needed for the population, job losses. There is no sector of industry on both sides of the LOC and border that is not going to be impacted in the next year. We've already seen the World Bank figures that essentially say that all of South Asia is going to see a massive drop in its GDP growth altogether. The second reason why we are at a particularly important pause is because of what's happening in Afghanistan, both in terms of the US-Taliban agreement, and most of us don't see it yet as a peace agreement, given the kind of violence that has continued there. And given the state of the intra-Afghan dialogue, the divisions within the democratic establishment in Afghanistan that will make it impossible to see a peaceful resolution at this particular moment. This becomes, again, a very, very important moment, one in which both India and Pakistan have very deep ties. I know that our friends in Pakistan have often questioned, and we've questioned this at Track2s as well, that whether India actually does have a role in Afghanistan, and the answer has always been a resounding yes. India is today one of the largest aid givers to Afghanistan. India has spent more than $3 billion over the last 20 years in Afghanistan, and has a level of goodwill which nobody can really deny when it comes to the people there, as well as serious infrastructural investments as well. To see all of that somehow go up in smoke would not be in India's best interest. For Pakistan too, whatever happens in Afghanistan will affect its own law and order situation, will affect its own social tensions. And therefore, it is necessary to stop and say, this is not business, this is not the normal situation with Afghanistan that we are looking at for the last 20 years. We are at the brink of something that could change everything. And therefore, there is a need to look at this moment closer. And the third, Ambassador Raghavan has already mentioned it, General Durrani also spoke about it, is that national security is no longer going to necessarily just mean security at the border, military security, even nuclear security. It's going to mean biosecurity. It's going to mean cyber security. It is going to mean food security and water security. These issues are likely to take over. And if they don't take over, and if they don't actually get some kind of precedence in both India and Pakistan, then we will face a larger impact from this kind of pandemic. And we certainly hope there won't be any such pandemics in the future, but we can't predict that. So to come to the end of what I would like to say, are there issues that the two sides can work together on? Certainly the Kartarpur corridor, I must say that I myself wrote about the fact that I do not think that the Kartarpur corridor on its own, making an exception for the corridor when other relations were not working, held out much hope, but I have been proven wrong. The Kartarpur corridor was not just made, it actually worked for several months. More importantly, it gave a template for other such projects that might actually increase the goodwill between both sides. It also gave a template for talks that are able to cut through what we have seen over the last few years. The fact that the two sides have had no dialogue, and yet here was a format for bilateral negotiations that were immunized from both terror attacks, election rhetoric, and all the rest. We had these talks take place at the Atari Wagah 0 point, and they were away from the glare of the media, and I do acknowledge the media can play spoiler in these areas, in these talks. So the fact that the Kartarpur gave us a template is something that should be picked up on. The second point is, and I mentioned this already, that the coronavirus is going to have the largest impact on our economies when it comes to migrant remittances. The World Bank says South Asian migrant remittances will drop 22%. Both of us in India and Pakistan understand what that is going to mean. When migrants don't just stop sending money home, but also stop being able to live abroad and have to move back and take jobs that are needed over here. This is going to have a huge impact on us. We need to find a way to work together, whether it is in ensuring that countries give migrants a better deal, or whether it is in looking for ways to accommodate them. The third area where we could cooperate is, of course, on the coronavirus itself, real cooperation. Indian and Pakistani doctors, Indian and Pakistani academics work around the world on these issues, and yet they are unable to work on these issues in our own region. According to the latest figures, the one bright spot, if you like, has been that the 8 SAARC nations don't actually account for the kind of numbers they should if you just went by pure statistics. After all, populations on both sides account for 21% of the world population, on 3% of the world's landmass. This is a dense population on both sides, and yet, until last week, they accounted for 1.1% of the total coronavirus cases around the world. Even if you factor in low testing in both our countries, you would acknowledge that there is something unique about the South Asian experience when it comes to coronavirus, which must be studied. After all, they are not going to study the South Asian experience in other parts of the world first. They will look at their own regions. We must look at our own. Finally, I would like to say, and this I say as much as a journalist who has covered both sides, from both sides of the border for 25 years now, I had never expected that we would be in the trough we are in for as long as we have been here. We now live in an era where, I mean, we're seeing Ambassador Kazi on this panel, Ambassador Raghavan on this panel. They are both no longer in the government. We now live in an era where there is no institution or very little institutional memory of actually talking to one another. The officers on both sides have not actually had bilateral dialogue for 6 years now. We live in an era where people to people are at their lowest ebb. There are no exchanges. There's no music being exchanged. There's no films being exchanged. There is no people-to-people ties as well. And visas, as you know, are at their lowest. We live in an era where trade across is at its lowest. Trade had increased despite all the problems between India and Pakistan. Yet today, every avenue of trade has been closed between the two countries to the detriment of both countries. And of course, there's this great World Bank report, as well as a report by a group called Brief, which I could share with the group, talking about what this really means economically. And finally, I would like to say we live in an era where the solution to Kashmir, or the dispute over Kashmir, is further than it has ever been before. There is no discussion today. There is no four-step formula that would work. There is a new reality in Jammu and Kashmir politically, and there is actually an understanding that that none of the assumptions of the past really still hold true. If at this point terror groups across the border were to restart operations, if the Afghanistan situation spirals out of control and provides more terror safe havens, this could actually be a point where we could even plumb to further depths between the two countries. I don't want to end on this on this very negative note, but I do want to say that it is necessary, even amidst all the chaos caused by the pandemic, to look at where India and Pakistan are today, and not to assume that just because we have not spoken, or just because we have no engagement, or just because we can continue to argue over so many issues publicly and internationally, that the situation on the ground will actually permit us to continue to do so. I'll leave it over there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suhasini, for that wonderful intervention that you have made. And very interestingly, my observations that you started with Jammu and Kashmir and almost ended with it. But at the end, you avoided it to make sure that the Kashmir sandwich didn't really emerge.
No, I'd be happy to have a separate conversation about it. I just meant that we are further from that resolution
so
today.
even while you were speaking, I was seeing the scroll of questions coming on the right side and on my monitor. And the pleasant thing which I must report to everyone is that the nature of questions and observations which are going on while the panelists are speaking are all extremely positive, extremely positive. And that is what an exchange of this kind, an interaction of this kind needs to be. So my compliments to the panelists so far. It's wonderful. We hope we keep it that way completely. May I now request Dr. Qamar Cheema, and let me admit, Dr. Cheema and I have been together many times on many exchanges together on television. It's such a pleasure to, abuse each other once in a while there. It's good, in South Asia, we need to abuse each other once in a while. But I never really knew that actually Dr. Cheema is not really a media man. He's a media man and undercover. He's actually an academic. And I had no idea, I did not discover this, that actually he's deeply into international relations as an academic. And that's what the great thing about his presence here is going to be. So looking forward to your intervention, Qamar.
Thank you, General Saab. It's always been a pleasure to be with you. And I have already enjoyed talk shows, television discussions with you. And thank you to the GCTC and to the wonderful panelists here sitting. And everybody's talking about positivity and everybody's talking about engaging. And I think that is the best part what I am seeing. And I think there's a large section of the societies from India and Pakistan who want that we need to move forward. Coming to my assertions on this topic, that how we have to move forward, I think this is something good. We need to talk. And what I believe that, the conventional understanding of the international politics has been like the states have been formulating alliances or going for the common security. And states have always relied that the state security will come from the military power. And that is the traditional security from where the state always tries to achieve its power. But I think in 21st century and even before in the last decade of the 20th century, things got changed. And state should have understood that the new patterns of the global security, where we have to bring a non-traditional security, and this traditional security mechanism that needs to be changed. And I think the entire concept of the national security needs the revision at the national, regional, and the global level. And for long, the states have not understood this, not just even in India, Pakistan, but globally. Even when if it comes to President Trump, he never realized that the environment could be a threat for them. But I think for the shared future of humanity and for the collective security, states need to think about non-traditional security parameters, and which includes providing security in environmental degradation, economic crises, mass migration, pandemic, communal and cultural identities, which are also, a challenge for many countries in the world. The way, for example, the President Trump is talking that we need to, I'm not going to give the green cards now, that is not just business or economy. That is also to protect the white supremacist perspective in the United States. But I think the developing countries like Pakistan and India, which have always been a disadvantaged position in countering emerging non-traditional security threats, because our majority investment have been into traditional security paradigms. So I think it is the first time in the history of Pakistan that a disease has been discussed in the National Security Committee. It has never been discussed before. So the Corps Commanders Conference, first time ever discussed the COVID-19. So this has never happened, I think, in this country before. And you understand that National Security Committee in Pakistan is the highest body for taking measures on national security issues, and on which we have discussed public health as a national security. So now public health is a national security, and the way Pakistani institutions are coming up, not just in Pakistan, but even in India and many other parts of the world. And we have discussed this, and I think we were it was very welcoming and good to see that Prime Minister of India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, invited a special session of SARC heads of the state, and he pledged the money there as well. And that was that how we have to fight this coronavirus emergency fund he created. It was positively, taken in Pakistan by many circles, but since the SARC was dysfunctional, this institutional facility which Pakistan, India, and many countries in the region were enjoying, we were not enjoying having this institutional framework, and we believe that Pakistan and India can put shock absorbers, and I think having SARC in this COVID-19, that was a very positive sign from India, although Pakistan has responded to this. And I think, but at the same time, what I understand and how we have to move forward from now, since I have spoken a lot, that I think Pakistan and India need to develop legal and institutional paradigms. And these legal and institutional paradigms can only work with the third-party guarantors, because we believe that the trust deficit is so much high. Normally the states don't have such a trust deficit, but in Pakistan, the trust in the Pakistan-India relations trust deficit is at a very high level. So what matters is that even if Pakistan works on the Kartarpur corridor, things have not been taken very much positively in the region. So what I understand, that if we go for example, 2003 ceasefire agreement, if we go for formalizing it and giving it a sort of a legal and institutional shape, I think what we have seen, what Suhasini has mentioned, that we have seen firing at the LOC when the UN General Secretary is talking about having peace and ceasefire around the world. But unfortunately, in this part of the world, we are seeing firings at the LOC on both sides. So I think if we have legal mechanisms that are going to help us, and we should have mutual legal assistance treaties in case, and we should come up with a voluntary disclosure from each other, which could be based on the pressure incentives and many other ways as well. At the same time, I think intelligence sharing under the Commonwealth Security License Relationship 1950, which is still, a long thing still to be implemented. And I think if we keep on moving this way, then things can be good. There was a time in Pakistan when the right-wing Islamic elements used to be a problem for developing relations with India or improving relations with India. But I'm a young Pakistani academician, and I understand, and I'm sure saying with the full authority that in Pakistan, General Hasnan and others, everyone wants to talk with India, even the media, even the military now I have heard to General Bajwa many times on this, even in the personal conversations. He's in a point of view that we need to open up to the world, forget any other country, even to India as well. So I think, but the problem is that we are seeing that the religious elements in India, which are in the shape of the politically, in the political offices, they are, not letting things happening here. The impression in Pakistan is like this. But I think since Pakistan, with this new government in Pakistan, Imran Khan, which waited for 1 year to engage with India, since he believed that Prime Minister Modi is to have elections and he will win elections and BJP will come in power and he will have more authority. But things went into another direction. But at the same time, I believe there is a lot of positivity in Pakistan and there is a lot of positivity in India, and we can move forward. And it's not just about Kashmir. There are so many other things which we need to discuss, and especially in non-traditional security paradigm. I think our investment in traditional security done by both India and Pakistan have brought us to this point that now nobody is looking towards guns and weapons and tanks and F-16 or any other weapon. Everybody is looking at how many ventilators we have and how many medical equipment grade and personal equipment gear we have for giving to the doctors. So I believe and encourage that whatever the discussion has been here, it's all good, and this track 2 dialogues which have already been happening, and with this track 2 dialogue and even which will happen in future, we will come to a conclusion and we will come up with the positive suggestions for our government, and especially to the media on both sides. They need to be very logical, and they must not drive hatred, and they must try to gel the societies and the media from both sides. I will not take a leverage that I will say this Indian media, it's from Pakistani media. I'm talking from both lenses. I'm not talking from any particular lens. So I believe that this effort by the GCTC and effort by General Hasnan and others will be a positive milestone.
Thank you, Dr. Qamar Cheema Saab. Thank you very much for that very positive note that you have sounded. And before I invite John Sharma to come in and make his remarks, may I just make a simple observation? Although some very positive scrolling remarks are going on the side of this frame on my computer, but I do want to remind the panelists that we need to be realists. At the beginning of April, you did have a very, very negative event up in Kashmir. Every time that we try and have a period of peace, a period of separation between anything very, very negative taking place between our two countries, we always come up against something which happens in Kashmir. And this event in which we had an infiltration in which 5 terrorists were killed and 5 of our special forces people were killed. This was a very unfortunate thing which happened. Somehow, can we, since General Sharma is going to be the next speaker and he's a military man himself like me, can there be something by which a message be clearly sent out, something which Pakistan Army can do, Pakistan security setup can do, by which you put an end to this, and you will find that things will actually start changing as far as attitudes in India are concerned. Over to you, General Sharma.
Thank you, sir. Very nice seeing you and seeing you in good health. From my side, also Ramadan Mubarak and all wishes to everybody else on this on the team here. And thank you, Aditya, for putting it together. It wasn't easy. I hope I can be heard, sir. Can you wave, please? Yes, sir. Thank you. I have to make 4 or 5 points quickly in the time given to me by General Hasnan. First is that there is obviously going to be a geopolitical global reset in the whole thing. And that obviously comes up from this fact that the world economies are floundered. The countries which are large aid givers earlier, for example, the United States or the Europe themselves are into difficult, problematic situations there, large unemployment there. So they would be generally becoming more and more inward looking. First priority for most nations across the world, which are in the West and which were largely supporting developing nations, would be now looking towards themselves in a long time to come, and that will be a significant global reset that will come on. And the aid that we were getting developing countries would largely dry up. So that would be a significant global reset that happens, and our subcontinent cannot be left alone in this whole issue. Now, South Asia has been said as an outlier nation in this COVID-19, which said, we haven't. Rather, Asia has been said as an outlier nation, that areas where the COVID-19 has not affected so much. But the fact of the matter is that even today, India has about 25,000 positive cases. Pakistan has about 12,000. We have had nearly, Pakistan has about 235 who are deceased, and we have 775. Between our two nations, about 1,000 all deaths have taken place, which is a significant number that have happened in these our two countries. And there is no end in sight. It doesn't look that it is going to end tomorrow. So there is where I come to the issue as to what is going to happen tomorrow is not easily, which can be gazed through. And I would lay doubt into two parts. First is, will COVID-19 fizzle out hereafter? Will it end in next, say, 1 month or 2 months? It ends out with another some amount of casualties both our nations will feel, and then thereafter we get on to getting our nations together. That's one part of the story. And the second part of the story is what has been predicted by many countries, like many organizations. John Hopkins said that India will have over 1 million killed over a time, and they are, they may be revising the figures. WHO said yesterday that Pakistan will have minimum 2 lakh people who will die in this one. So you see, it is two different, very widely separated scenarios that can happen: a fizzle versus a large amount of casualties that can happen. Both scenarios will turn out to be different in the manner how our countries behave in inter-relationship between India and Pakistan. And that would be the end of this COVID-19, and it would be graduated. It will take a couple of months to die away. So it would obviously implies that the end will imply how relationship between two nations move forward here. Now let me talk about today. Now today, as General Hasnan had mentioned now, and also in his remarks, things have not been present in the course of last 1 month. You see the tweets which have been happening, they all relate to J&K or to Kashmir, especially the Command Minister of Pakistan. Even the Corps Commanders Conference referred some time ago on 5th of April spoke about Kashmir, despite that they met together for COVID. So the last 2 months and the operations that have happened, the deaths that have taken place, the present is not a very conducive atmosphere to say that, despite our nations, both of our nations suffering so much, we have put those issues behind us and we are looking forward. It doesn't look it. It looks as if we are still in status quo here. So I come to be, after this all ends, whenever it ends, what would be our priorities? For India, and I would say similarly for Pakistan, the priorities will be socio-economic development. The nation, we have seen so much, as Swashni has said some time ago, the lakhs that have migrated from their work stations to their respective states will now come back into those areas and get absorbed and start moving to that direction is not a simple problem. It will be a Herculean task. The industry moving will be another Herculean task. Again, so will be to take this in Pakistan also. And then, of course, people will demand changes in health crisis. It will be what the nations will seek. The nation will say, next time like this happens, please wake up, sort out our health issues, sort out the public health facilities. So the demand of the nations will be, and public will be so much on sorting out our internal anxieties, education systems, that we have to back burner many of these major issues which are happening here, and also unemployment, which both nations are also going to suffer hereafter. So therefore, sometime at least we also will start looking inward. We also start thinking inwardly, saying that we have to resolve the problems that we have suffered all in the period of 3 months. So I would come to the significant part is that to succeed, that two of our countries move forward, what needs to be done? What needs to be sorted out in case, say, in 2021 or subsequently thereafter, we get around as normal nations across the world and get on a platform in which we can discuss issues, talk, and sort out many issues. So that prognostication will take a little effort here, and we have to seek avenues. First, I will raise 3 issues. First is the internal situation in Pakistan. It matters to us. The Pakistani media, which we are students of and we read for a very long time, not very nice about the Pakistani government today, and also not very nice about the relationship between Pakistan government and the Pakistan establishment, the army. It's always being broadcast nearly every day. Every media is being carried out, and there are issues being raised that all is not hunky-dory in Pakistan, and there will be worries. So how does the internal situation in Pakistan pan out? That matters tremendously for the future. Second is issue of JNK, which General Hassan has raised very rightly. It irks, it pains to see there is infiltration. One doesn't say that all can be sorted out. 75 years can't be brushed aside in one day. It will take a time. But the fact of the matter is, it has to be back. One has to think about future. Let's put Kashmir into back burners, not infiltrate people, get some kind of ceasefire imposed with deliberation, saying, okay, we cease to retain itself to Kashmir. And third is also the issue of how India handles the internal imbroglio within the country has been existing in a period of some time where there have been issues which need support on, mindful of the issues that sorry, sir. Okay, the world will not be so kind. World will not be so kind in future in case we two countries start talking of problematic situation between us. World is not going to be bothered about us, so we have to get around to sort this out. I will sum up by saying there is great hope, immense amount of hope that this crisis be the catalyst for bringing two great nations, Pakistan and India, on the same. Let's talk, sort out issues between ourselves. If we sort out issues that I mentioned earlier, and if that happens, well, we have much to give to the world. And I'm so that we will be able to address many of these issues that have been brought out today in this forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Rakesh Sharma. Thank you very much for your very articulate views. We have a seventh panelist also with us, perhaps publicized on the initial publicity which was done for the seminar. We have got from Pakistan, Mr. Raza Sayyed, and I hope he's there already or with us. Let me just introduce him. He is a media and a strategic communications professional from Islamabad, a former public service professional, currently hosting prime-time current affairs TV talk show on we call Capital Today on in Islamabad, Pakistan. He takes keen into public policy, public opinion research, and political sciences. He's also a member of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations. Now, I'm going to make use of his time also. He may like to make an intervention. 6-7 minutes. But I want to particularly request him to address one issue, which struck me when it came on as a part of the scroll, which is there on the screen. And I would request him to particularly address one issue. What are the chances of sane voices? This is not my question, it's a question which has come to the panel. What are the chances of sane voices of common people in Pakistan? Common people with a sense of balance to contact, to make a dent on the hard so-called political or ISI stance, not my words again, ISI or political within Pakistan. In other words, from a militaristic sort of outlook and approach, a secure approach, how much is it likely that sane voices of the common people will emerge in Pakistan? This is a particular question for you to address also, Mr. Raza Sayyed. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, General. Thank you very much, GCTC World, for inviting me in today's event. Although we were supposed to discuss about the COVID-19 situation that is happening around the world, and not just in this part of the world where we live, the fifth largest country in the world, Pakistan, and the second largest country in the world, India. What we are facing is a threat to the status quo. And every time, whenever there is a threat big enough, which can alter the course of history, there is always a possibility of some new world order coming out and emerging from nowhere. This is more like a black swan event. I can say that perhaps somebody was not even in a position to make a guesstimate about that there would be a pandemic, although there have been a lot of pandemics in past history. Like about 100 years ago, this region has also suffered. There was a Spanish flu. Millions of people suffered. Then there was no scientific development during past 100 years, which was good enough to cater for any similar pandemic, and now that we are hit by COVID-19, we seem to be as clueless and as helpless as perhaps we were 100 years ago. So this is one big challenge for the whole world, and Pakistan and India being among those countries which do not have that kind of financial strength, they do not have that kind of infrastructure strength to combat the situation like the Europe is doing, like the Americas are doing. So our focus has to remain on how to let the people of this region first of all realize the gravity of the threat and then respond to it. Being a media person, what I'm facing for past a month or so is the biggest challenge here in Pakistan, and perhaps things would be pretty much similar in India as well, is let the people feel the gravity of the threat. Everybody seems to take it very easily. People are of the view that, oh, fine, I don't know anyone who has actually suffered from COVID-19, hence I'm not going to, hit. I'm not going to get hit by it like anyone else could have. Now, when there is the possibility of a challenge to the status quo, that has the potential to alter the situation. The question which was being asked by the kind general with regards to one being posted on the forum is uh, it was about addressing the sane voices. I think as far as the sane voices are concerned, we all are sane voices. The ones we heard and the ones we are will be hearing in future. Sane voices would always try to mitigate all those challenges, minimize all those risks, which are not good for the people of this region. We are talking about more than 170 billion people who live in South Asia. And it would be very illogical to even think of that sane voices are not at work. I believe that sane voices are certainly at work in Pakistan. That is where I'm coming from. And I also expect and I also hope that sane voices in India are also examining the whole situation on the merit of the gravity of its sensitivity. There is no denying in the fact that Kashmir remains the bone of contention between the people of subcontinent for over 7 decades. And as long as that bone of contention remains there unresolved, there is hardly any chance, considering the past record, the past 7 decades, there is hardly any chance that regardless of how sane voices would be empowered across the border, you will not see anything drastic positive coming out of this situation unless and until the primary issue, the primary bone of contention, that is the Kashmir issue, is resolved between India and Pakistan, and that too in line with all that was discussed, decided, and endorsed by the United Nations 7 decades ago. So that is my answer to that question. And coming back to COVID-19, I think there is an extreme need of mutual cooperation among the neighbors, because neighbors are the countries, because of the proximity, their circumstances are very much similar to each other. So what best Pakistan and India can do about combating COVID-19 is share information, share expertise, and share experiences about how to handle. And the challenges which are being faced in India are pretty much similar to the challenges that are being faced in Pakistan. So I think this is a golden opportunity to the people of South Asia to come forward and mitigate the risk and the challenges which are being imposed on us because of this COVID-19 pandemic. Uh, Perhaps as we speak, there is no conflict going on in the world which can be considered more attention grabbing than the COVID intervention. So COVID is the biggest threat. COVID is the biggest challenge. And if we can combat COVID together as good neighbors, I believe that will pave way for future cooperation. As Swansea Heather rightly pointed out, that Kartarpur perhaps was underestimated by some people, that this might not translate into a success, but the way it actually translated into a success has created a very good impact between two nations. And the friendly people of India and the friendly people of Pakistan, they are very happy with the way the Kartarpur corridor has been activated and established, and it's functional. So doctors must be talking to each other, scientists must be talking to each other, politicians must be talking to each other, and I would say even the generals should be talking to each other across the border, because that is the only way forward to bring peace and prosperity to this part of the world, and perhaps the most neglected part of the world, most deprived part of the world, and I think nobody else is to be blamed but the governments of this region for all that escalation that has happened in past. And it is, and it will again be a test for the governments on both the side, that how they find an opportunity in this challenge to diffuse all sorts of disagreements and to bring the people closer to each other. But then again, the last thing which I would like to say is it is dependent completely on the political will of our governments on both the sides of the border. The government of Pakistan, the government of India. If they are willing, things will move forward. If they have their own political choices, which are perhaps considered more favorable to further their individual agendas, then I'm afraid there won't be any change in the status quo. However, COVID-19 is something which perhaps in my comprehension will stay here for maybe 1 year or maybe even 2 years, depending on what the doctors have been saying. And so we need to develop a lifestyle in which we learn to live with COVID-19. There will not be any situation anytime soon that life will be back to normal as we knew it 2 months ago. So COVID is here for maybe 2 years, maybe even more. And how many of us will survive COVID is a question that needs to be answered. And perhaps time will tell that the survival rate of COVID-19 in this region would be better than the other part of the world, or maybe worse than the other part of the world. There are a lot of conspiracy theories prevailing. A lot of people say that the people in this region, they have a better immunity because of the living conditions. They don't have access to, healthy drinking water. They don't have access to cleaner air. Therefore, they are having better immunity towards certain viruses, COVID-19 included. I'm no expert on health, so I really cannot make an endorsement on that. But this is the general perception that people of this region perhaps have a better chance to survive because of their perceived better immunity as compared to the European countries and as compared to the North American continent and even the Australian continent. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I hope that my audio was audible to all of you, because I'm a bit challenged with the internet speed at this point in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nazar Sayed Saab, for that excellent intervention. And may I put General Durrani on a little warning to you, sir, that you have asked for a little time at any stage to make a few points on Kashmir. So I'm just putting you on warning, sir, that I'll come to you in the next round. One person will speak before you. Now, there are a couple of questions that I have with me, but I find that while scrolling through them, most of these questions appear to be in the form of observations rather than really questions. So one or two of them I'm going to particularly ask, and I will focus it on a particular panelist. Anupama Sharan, she has asked many questions. She made many observations. Thank you for those. I'm picking up this particular question of yours. how does Pakistan plan to overcome its failed state stigma? May I say again, how does Pakistan plan to overcome its failed state stigma vis-a-vis Bangladesh that has made remarkable progress? And there is life beyond the Kashmir issue, which is now done and dusted. Can we expect some cooperation now? Very, very pointed question, which will also probably come to Jan Durrani, and we'll allow him to also address this. The second part of it, there is life beyond the Kashmir issue, which is now done and dusted. Can we expect some cooperation now? May I request Ambassador Qazi to address this particular question on the aspect of the stigma, so-called perceived failed state stigma of Pakistan vis-a-vis Bangladesh, and how this affects our relations?
Thank you for the question. Can I first confirm that you can hear me, even if you can't see me?
Sir, we are able to hear you.
Able or unable? Are you able or unable?
Sir, we are able to hear you. Please continue.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I had a few observations in my own mind based on the comments of the other participants. But the lady has put this question and all about failed state stigma. But Pakistan is confronted with a number of domestic and external challenges, which if it doesn't deal with successfully, can lead to an outcome such as that of a failed state. But there is no reason to presuppose that Pakistan will not be able to learn from its past mistakes and will not be able to formulate policies to deal with current challenges. Pakistan has already dealt with a number of challenges and is very much there, and there is no reason to believe that we won't be able to meet with that. The particular remark that Kashmir is done and dusted, that is something which no sane voice in Pakistan would accept that as a definition of the situation. What has happened since August the 5th is that India has unilaterally removed Kashmir from the bilateral dialogue based on the Shimla Agreement and the UN resolutions with regard to Kashmir. So, as far as India is concerned, they were quite clear about rejecting UN resolutions after they had gone to the UN, accepted it, etc. Now, since August the 5th, there is a very specific rejection of the Shimla Agreement, which is the only basis, agreed basis. UN resolution is the basis as far as Pakistan is concerned, but Shimla is the agreed basis of the two countries. Even that basis has been removed. So if you remove Kashmir from the bilateral agenda, then you make it extraordinarily difficult for India-Pakistan relations to prosper and to improve. Now, Mr. Raghavan, Ambassador Raghavan, for whom I have the highest respect, did say that we need to move away from trying to find solutions to specific issues and go towards non-traditional security issues. I have no problem with that. I agree with that. But some of the traditional issues, particularly Kashmir, these are not dead issues. These are live issues. In the sense, there's a situation going on in Kashmir. And when we talk about Kashmir, we are talking about the Indian administered part of Kashmir rather than our part of Kashmir, on which we can also have a discussion. But since August the 5th, the situation there feeds directly and in a live fashion into attitudes in Pakistan. There is a world opinion about the human rights situation in Kashmir. There are statements by international leaders, by the UN, by from all kinds of forums. It is a situation. And if India says that's done and over, that's gone, then of course that makes India-Pakistan relations that much more difficult. Now, if you see that as a symptom of failure or state failure in Pakistan, I would have to disagree there. In fact, I do think we cannot forget live issues which have defied resolution over the past 70 years, merely because we are moving to non-traditional issues. We have to move to non-traditional issues, which can only be dealt with through bilateral and regional and international cooperation. But to unilaterally remove an issue from the bilateral agenda, which has been backed by international forums, it would be most unrealistic, would be unproductive. So I would urge a new look, a new attitude towards these issues. We differ on these issues. It will take a long time, but to altogether remove an issue which is considered one of the core issues. I know from India's point of view, one of the core issues is your perception of Pakistan's backing of terror in India and Indian administered Kashmir. We may differ, but what I have said, even in all my writings, that if one country says this is a core issue for us and we want improved relations with that country, then we must agree that it is a core issue. If India truly, and in turn, if India truly wants a relationship with Pakistan, and Pakistan says the situation in Kashmir is a core issue for Pakistan vis-a-vis relations with India, then an India which gives priority to its relationship with Pakistan must deal with it also as a core issue of Pakistan and therefore part of the agenda, very much apart from the formal record. So we have to have attitudinal changes. Otherwise, even through civilized debate, we start getting involved in rather pointless one-upmanship in some of the arguments which I've listened to. India and Pakistan need to get on. We will have to address non-traditional issues, but also the old issues which still have huge life in them and which have defied any kind of leave alone resolution, even initial understanding of what the definition of the problem is. Here we need real sane voices on both sides, on the Indian side, the Pakistan side. And I agree, very often we have had irrational points of view being the dominant framing the dominant narrative, which has led to the current situation of impasse. This has to be addressed, this situation, by intellectuals, by people like, by forums such as the one we are now participating in. And in that respect, I do think that these forums must inform over a period of time the attitudes of politicians and leaders. Politicians and leaders are also circumscribed by their immediate political environments, and they are not as free agents as we like to suppose. And yet, those of us who believe in the absolute indispensability of better relationships, a relationship between India and Pakistan, even though many issues will not be resolved for a long time, but no issue which is of importance to either country should be removed from the agenda, because then that would signal a lack of interest or genuine interest in improving the relationship. This may be difficult to accept because of emotions and narratives and perceptions, but it is absolutely essential. So I would say we need to see how we can approach, and we've got to do it in a sincere manner where both attach the same absolute importance to our bilateral relationship, not just now, but even after this COVID-19, which will definitely not be the end of world crises. As I mentioned, the climate crisis is far more deadly than COVID-19 will be. And COVID-19 will give rise, it's not if, it will give rise to succeeding pandemics. As you know, the second wave of the Spanish flu was 25 times more deadly than the first wave. Who knows what the second phase of the COVID-19, the scientists don't have an answer. Who are we to pretend? And yet, with all these dangers, COVID-19 is minor. It's a picnic compared to what we face from climate change. So India and Pakistan have an utter imperative to get on with each other, to see things with a different attitude, something which we've never done before. And I think a lot of the fault is shared on both sides. We've made awful mistakes. You've made awful mistakes. Can we put a value on a better relation, a real value on a better relationship with each other? Or is it the case that one says, look, we'd like to have a better relationship, but if it's not going to happen, we can live with it. We are, after all, two nuclear weapons powers, and it would be irresponsible in the extreme to adopt the latter attitude where we can say, well, to hell with you, even if you won't sort of want, you don't want to be friends. That is an anti-people attitude, a class warfare attitude, an elitist attitude. It can never be the attitude of one people towards another. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Kazi. Thank you very much for that response. I'd now like to come to, I think I did make a point that I would come to John Durrani after this. John Durrani, I'm sure you would like and you would personally want to make an intervention on Kashmir. But I have a pointed question on that itself, which I've extracted from the scroll of questions coming to me. While you make your points on Kashmir, which you would like to, my particular issue, which I would like you to request you to address, is the possibility, is there a possibility that we quarantine Kashmir? The Kashmir issue, the word quarantine has become so common these days in COVID-19 environment. I would say apply it in the political environment between India and Pakistan. Quarantine the Jammu and Kashmir issue for some time. This is a stand which India has had for many, many years. Quarantine this, put it away for some time. Let's move on. Let's take our relationship forward in different other areas and different agendas, and address the issues which Mr. Raghavan had triggered off in our minds, the whole aspect of non-traditional security threats. So what would you think about that, and how much do you think that is possible? Over to you, John Durrani.
Thank you, Ada. Certainly we'll talk about Kashmir, including your point. But before that, if I can just quickly get 2 points out of the way, very briefly, both raised by this bright young lady, Soichin, whom I've known for some time. She talked about the low percentage of people affected in the subcontinent. I do not know. I mean, technical people can, or medical people can explain it much better. I think the environment in which we live is so polluted that our people already have some sort of a herd, we call herd immunity. So maybe they get affected a little less. The second one was, of course, very heartening for me, because I thought it's only in Pakistan that we do not have institutional memory, and we have no system in which we can continue to benefit from that. And when she said that in India too that happens, so I can say, God, thank God for these small mercies and waiting. But let me now come to Kashmir. But before that, let me also say that met a very bright young man, Rakesh, I think, who has got his heart in the right place, head screwed also in the right place. I too wish him all the best, and his optimism should become infectious, because this is something that with which people start, and after some time, we get a little disappointed. So Rakesh, keep it up. But now on Kashmir, before the quarantine thing, why initially one did not talk about it? Because the whole book and discussion in Spy Chronicles with Dulles, we were spending all our efforts on how do we move forward in Kashmir. And we had our different views. I thought it will not be possible. If it happens, whenever it will happen, we will see. This seems to be the roadmap. His roadmap was a little different. But ultimately, we all agreed that at some stage that might have to happen. And the best, remark on the launching was made by Yashwant Sinha, the former foreign minister, finance minister, when he said, we are on the wrong path because muscular policy in Kashmir will not take us anywhere. In the meantime, Mr. Sinha has also said even before this COVID thing, coronavirus thing, after 370 was resolved. On 370, Dulles' point was, why remove a provision which is already toothless, means nothing. It's only giving a certain illusion to the Kashmiris. Why remove it? Once it was done, Mr. Sinha said, it seems it's the end of the game. We have lost Kashmir, the people, the heart and mind. Now the territory will be kept by the army. Now with that background, he came to the conclusion in Pakistan about Kashmir that if Modi is the one who is going to drive the whole thing in this particular direction, in the meantime, the Citizen Act also created certain ways within India. Who are we to stop him? Let him continue to make mistakes, and we will see in what shape then the subcontinent is by the time, another virus also has left it. We'll have to see at that time. But essentially, under the circumstances, not doing anything from our side was almost the consensus. We agreed here that let's not do anything because Modi is doing what is ultimately going to help us. Now, your point, of course, is a very good one about the quarantine. 71 war, you know what happened, and after that, there was no stomach here to talk about Kashmir. For 20 years, we hardly said anything. And then a time came, the late 89, early 90, almost after 2 decades, something happened and which, brought this thing again to the fore. And that meant that regardless of what we want, Kashmir will ensure, the Kashmiris will ensure, the situation there will ensure that we come back to it time and again and address it. Otherwise, this idea was there, this idea by default was there, but right now I don't think this is going to be possible at all. There are certain, issues in which whether you like it or not, you're going to be there. On the western borders, there's no way that we can take our finger out of Afghanistan. That is also a given. But in case of Kashmir, because of the situation there, the spillover is always over the borders, and that will mean that it will keep on sucking the countries into this issue, whether we want it or not. And that is why, one goes back to the great lesson that we drew at that time, also in discussion, Master Jahangir has just said, there is no escaping. So to deny that we can just, even if you have to keep it, if you don't want to touch it, then ensure that nothing happens. Let it continue, like after the bus. The bus thing started, I thought that was the idea. Let the buses flow, let the Kashmiris get involved with each other, and in the meantime, we, the two countries, will have something else also to do, and we will not be only burdened by this particular point. So we have tried. Thank you, once again.
Thank you, Jandarani. Thank you very much for your opinion on Kashmir. I don't know whether General Rakesh Sharma would like to come in at this stage to give his thoughts on what Jandarani has just said and what Master Qazi has just mentioned. Would you like to come in, General Sharma?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. So the question about Kashmir done and dusted and the response that we got needs to be addressed. Now, there was a reference to Shimla Agreement. Now, the fact is that Shimla Agreement actually clearly laid down that neither side will attempt to alter any of the LOC issue unilaterally and irrespective of any mutual difference. So there is a laid down parameter, the basics of Shimla Agreement, which actually, if you see, I'm not saying I'm contesting Shimla Agreement, but over from 72 till date, so many times attempts have been made to alter the LOC forcibly, including right up to Kargil, to say that no, Shimla Agreement is the basis, but we can alter it and you can't alter it. It doesn't gel, sir. It doesn't net. And then, of course, there is infiltration. So we respect the Shimla Agreement, but it just has to be mutual respect. It can't be said that we will alter it when we want to do it, but you can't do it. There is an issue. Second issue I want to bring out, sir, as Hasnan, you rightly mentioned about quarantine, which I refer to as back burner, the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. The fact is that till the time, like this instance of 5 of these people having died ours on the border on 3rd, 4th of April, well, it doesn't gel. You can't have body bags being brought to India and we say that we continue talking. You have to get on to pushing the issue into some kind of limbo for some time. And then, we can come back to it and discuss if you want to discuss it. But for the time being, if you say that status quo in Kashmir, well, then there is possibility of movement of the receipts more and more. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Jan Sharma. Thank you for your remarks. Lots of questions, lot of observations have come in the last few minutes. I'm trying to compile them together and put it together as a question to different panelists. I've got something for Ambassador Raghavan, and based on that, I will also come back to Dr. Kamar Chima on the same one before I ultimately go back to Suhasini Haider. For General Raghavan, for Mr. Raghavan particularly, since you are the one who raised this very, very interesting issue about non-traditional security threats, as a seasoned diplomat, how do you feel that Pakistan can be convinced to set aside Kashmir or quarantine Kashmir, as I said, hold back infiltration, and at the same time think of progressing the relationship with India on the basis of other non-traditional threats which are common to both the countries? As a seasoned diplomat, how do you think you would like to project this to Pakistan? Has Mr. Raghavan, I hope Mr. Raghavan has heard that question.
Yeah, yes, I have.
Okay, great.
I've got my mic on now.
Right.
Thank you very much for bringing me on again. Well, quite frankly, in my view, there is very little that India can do to convince Pakistan about a certain course of action. I think the fact is the two countries have diverged very considerably over the last 70 years. And each of them is internally self-contained. I don't think we influence the debate. We can influence the debate in Pakistan to take a particular trajectory, just like Pakistan cannot influence the debate to take a particular trajectory in India. It's a kind of vanity which made us think that we could. In fact, we can't. I think Pakistan has to come to whatever conclusion it wants to on its own. The question was whether this crisis, depending on its future evolution, will lead to that kind of rethinking both in India and in Pakistan, that we give a greater priority to non-traditional security parameters and non-traditional security issues. It doesn't mean that the traditional issues are forgotten or are of no importance. No, they will remain of importance. But if there is one lesson from history, that is that India and Pakistan cannot, in a time-bound way, come to certain agreed determinations on issues such as Kashmir and any others. I think those issues are they are not mathematical problems. They are issues of identity. They are issues of self-perception, and they are issues of how we envisage ourselves. So the points which Ambassador Kazi made are familiar ones. How can you do this to Article 370, and to which also there are ready-made answers. Pakistan never gave any importance to Article 370 or any of the other constitutional provisions with regard to Jammu and Kashmir till they were abolished or modified. Now this is a sterile debate. We can go on about it till the cows come home. It will not change. The question is whether this crisis jolts us out of this traditional pattern of thinking and throws up one or two new issues on which we could possibly work together.
Thank you, Ambassador Raghavan. Thank you for your views on that. Now I'm coming to Kamar Chima Saab, and I would request Suhasini to be also ready to respond to almost to the same question. Kamar Chima Saab, I've got something for you which I would request you to respond to, and then subsequently you can go ahead and make your remarks that you were wanting to do. I would say that given the situation that we are in at the moment, where we are not even entered anywhere near a post-pandemic phase, we find an awkward thing happening in the Middle East. We suddenly find that Pakistan, particularly from the propaganda angle, from the influence and information operations angle, is making serious efforts to try and create a dent in the relationships that India has established in the Middle East. Now, this aspect of influence operations, information warfare, is one of the aspects of non-traditional threats, which can be considered because of the fact that social media has become an instrument of almost like a weapon by itself today. What would you say to that? You can quarantine Kashmir, you can do all that here, you may even stop infiltration in Kashmir, but if you continue playing this game of doing India down internationally, trying to create dents in our relationships, where we are building up our relationships in our near abroad region, don't you think this doesn't really pan out very well as far as a future relationship between India and Pakistan is concerned? Over to you.
Yes, thank you, General Hasnain. I think your question, if I just put it from this way, that it is India which has a overt policy that India wants to isolate Pakistan diplomatically. We never said this, that we want to isolate India diplomatically. So this is India's policy. I have heard it from many times from Indian officials, and they have been doing it. That is why SARC was made dysfunctional. And one more thing, even if Pakistan is working to create dent between India and Middle East, let me tell you that India is so much deeply into Middle East that even if Pakistan works on that, we can't do this, because the way Indian population is engaged in Middle Eastern countries, be it from the Muslim lens or be it from the lens that the Indian young men and the old men and the Indian society, which is having jobs and doing businesses in Middle East, they are contributing into the Middle Eastern economy. So I think it is Pakistan which is complaining to the Middle East that they are not speaking much on Kashmir, and the OIC has left it to Pakistan. So we are making the perspective, and we are just telling them to give a due importance to the Kashmir in these times. So I think the opinion in Pakistan is about the Middle East, that the Middle East is tilting towards India much, and we need to do something. And I think we are just historically, we have already been gathering support from the Middle East, just from the religious lens and Islamic lens, that the OIC and other Islamic states should not develop relations with India because India is occupying Kashmir. So I think, the dependence and the bilateral relations between India and Middle East have gone so far. And I think from international relations perspective, the complex interdependence, a theory which says that the way nations are dependent on each other. And above all, India is receiving more than 35 billion foreign remittance from Middle East alone. So forget the other remittance they are receiving from the entire of the world, but alone from Middle Eastern countries. And I have met many Indians in Middle East when I would travel to Saudi Arabia and other places. So I think this is, I just don't buy this argument that Pakistan is able enough. Yes, the public in Middle East looks the Kashmir issue as a disputed issue, and they want it should be treated as per the UN resolutions, and the Muslims should get some sort of relief in occupied Kashmir. But I think the state level, it is not like that. And now coming to my assertion, what I want to make it, I believe that I am an academician, and when I go to Indian TV, I just don't look like an academician. So I just want to talk that if I am here in this webinar, what I want to tell you that there must not be questions here that Pakistan is a failed state and the Kashmir should be done and dusted. I think this is not going to be acceptable to anyone in Pakistan. So what needs to do is that we need to find out avenues how we have to move forward. We believe in Pakistan. There were Islamists in Pakistan which didn't want Pakistan to have good relations with India. Now there are Hindu religious elements, fanatics in India, which don't want but India to move forward with Pakistan. So the things have changed a lot. Even Pakistan has convinced the Islamists, those who are having guns and those who are the institutional Islamists, to whom we call as Jamaat-e-Islami and Jamiat Ulama Islam Fazlur Rahman, those are who are going into the parliament and winning elections. Everybody wants to talk to India, but the problem here is that we cannot come up with the rhetoric. I have not spoken a word on Kashmir. All what I want to say is that move forward. That doesn't mean that I don't want Pakistan and India should not talk to Kashmir. I think the first thing that will be discussed will be on Kashmir. But India cannot rely on one thing, that Pakistan, we invited Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif on the inauguration of Prime Minister Modi, and Prime Minister Modi went to Pakistan and we have not got enough response. I think the decisions, the actions like Kartarpur Sahib corridor was a very welcoming. The way it has been responded by the right-wing nationalist in India, Hindu nationalist in India, this is not acceptable. And I think what we believe, the entire foreign policy is being driven by the Indian media and Indian pressure. The government takes decision. And I think here in Pakistan, it's not like that. Please.
Thank you, Committee Masab. Thank you very much. And I'm sure you and I will debate this the next time we meet on television together once again. Right? But I'm going to put the same question to Suhasini. I'm going to put it because she is also the one who raised this issue of Kartarpur Sahib and said that what a wonderful, how it panned out unexpectedly. It turned out to be a very positive kind of a development. But there was no mention about this fact, and I'm sorry if I have to introduce any negativity into it. There was no talk of what was happening in Kartarpur Sahib, which was being reported by the Indian media all the time, the aspect of the Khalistani elements who were there, the perceptions which were prevailing in the Indian the Punjab government of Punjab itself on what will probably transpire at Kartarpur Sahib with the ISI elements there and the presence of Khalistanis, etc. This aspect has not entered into this at all, and I don't want to bring it in unless Suhasini wants to speak about it. I am only interested to say that it is the Pakistani capability of influence operations, in particular information warfare, which develops with the help of the ISPR and what it has done in the Middle East of late, which is being reported in the Indian media extensively at the moment. What would you have to say about this, Suhasini?
Well, to begin with, General Hassan, I would definitely say, and I said this earlier and I've written about it, so I won't walk away from that. I actually did not feel that the Kartarpur exception was something that the Indian government should have made, because at a time when the Indian national position and the position of the Indian government was that there would be no talks with Pakistan, then to make an exception on the basis of religion goes against India's secular credentials. There were also, what you pointed out, the worries that Pakistan would be fishing in troubled waters, that Khalistani elements would be allowed to just be present over there and to interact with people coming over the border. But I did also point out that I think the Kartarpur exception seemed, at least until it was shut down because of the coronavirus pandemic, seemed in fact to have come across as a much more positive experience than even I had expected. So I think we have to give the Kartarpur corridor that kind of credit, that it has more or less remained outside of the greatest worries of both security experts and other analysts over here. I listened to Mr. Chima with a lot of interest and a lot of respect. I do think that in the Gulf, when it comes to whether a few Twitter handles say something or not, these are not things that India should worry about. India should worry about its own bilateral relations in the Gulf. It should worry about, as the Indian ambassador in the UAE has tweeted, it should worry about problematic messages going out from Indian nationals who are living in the Gulf, and that is something that has been widely reported in India. When it comes, to the question of whether India is more responsible for the current impasse in relations with Pakistan or not, I think it's very clear that the government of the day has given its position very clearly. There will be no talks until terror ends. There is no right now a roadmap for walking back to talks with Pakistan. But I do think, and I think it was raised right at the beginning by Ambassador Raghavan, that the ball is entirely in the leaders' court. If the leaders of the two countries who have been elected with such huge majorities decide to change the fate of the two countries, then that will be changed. I know that the general belief is that in Pakistan it is all decided by the generals. Nothing will be decided by the Prime Minister. And frequently we have the talk about spoilers in every situation, that even when there are talks going on, something blows up and the talks fall apart. But I still think that in the past, what we have seen is that when leaders decide to take initiatives, things do happen, things do change. Who had thought that the cross LOC bus that we saw, for example, would have worked the way it did? Who would have thought that any of these confidence building measures would have worked the way it did? Who would have thought that despite Pakistan not giving India MFN status for more than 20 years, that trade would increase year upon year and hit new highs until, of course, Pakistan shut down that in August last year. So I think it's necessary to look at each of these initiatives that were taken really by political leadership and say it is always possible to change the future. There is little to be sort of pointed out by saying, you did this and we did this. The chronology is apparent to everybody on both sides of the border as to who did what and who has actually taken the cause of peace between the two countries further. The fact is that despite everything, India has a very, very credible case when it comes to cross-border terrorism. It has a very, very credible case of terrorist groups that are based inside Pakistan that have been sanctioned by the UN Security Council. And it has made that point very clearly that the terrorists exist on one side of the border, that the attacks are happening on this side of the border. And that is a situation that needs to change. So I think if we're just getting into the idea of who began talks and who stopped talks, we will really not go very far. But where we do need to come to is two questions in my mind, and I'll leave it over there. The first question, and I respectfully disagree with Mr. Sharma, who said that while body bags are coming back, there can be no talks, because by that logic, no war would ever end. There would be no talks anywhere in the world because there can be no ultimatums to talks. Eventually, we have had situations, even with this government, where attacks have happened and talks were started or talks were attempted. And I think that to take that rigid position simply boxes us into a corner. So one question has to be, are we just going to continue with this situation? Because as I listed earlier, there are many reasons why this is a transitional moment for the subcontinent and for India and Pakistan in particular. The second question that needs to be asked is, and this is something I think all our panelists have debated, I'm sorry, but it's one of the oldest questions. Are we going to try and talk about what we can agree on, as we did with Kartarpur, or are we just going to simply talk about things that we definitely are not going to be able to agree on? And my sense is that we can, in our generation, continue down this path. But I really, really do hope, General Hasnain, that our children and our children's children will be able to join debates across the border without even having to ask this question, that there will be enough points that we do have to talk. And look at all the points that have been listed by the panelists just on this session. Each one is critical to the survival of the two countries. And yet, we have not yet gotten to that position where we are able to actually agree on these 2 points and then take it forward.
Thank you, Suhasini. Thank you very much. Very passionate, very focused on the response completely. We have come to almost to the end of our time, but I thought among the panelists and the add-on panelist, Mr. Raza Sayyed, I thought he's not had a question to him. There are questions emerging from the scroll which can definitely be addressed to him. And therefore, I'd like to end this whole thing on the note of putting a question to Mr. Raza Sayyed if he's ready to take it. My question to him, not my question, really is extracted from what's coming onto the scroll of questions, is that actually you are the only person who restricted himself mainly to speak about the COVID-19 era and the post-COVID-19 era. So, if you were to give one recommendation, Raza Sayyed Saab, to the Pakistan government, as a very seasoned media and a public relations person, if you were to give one recommendation to the government of Pakistan to take up an initiative which cannot be refused by India, which you feel can just not be refused by India, what would that initiative be? Particularly at this time, considering the fact that medical diplomacy between India and Pakistan is something which has been a major success. The number of people who have come from Pakistan to India for medical treatment has been phenomenal over a period of time, particularly at the time of Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, late Mrs. Sushma Swaraj. The way she used to give visas virtually and permission to people to come based upon a tweet at various times. So what do you think, Raza Sayyed Saab, would be a particularly an initiative from the Pakistan government which cannot be refused by India?
Thank you very much again. I believe that this COVID-19, this challenge is an opportunity for both India and Pakistan government. And since we do have similar circumstances with regards to a lot of things, a lot of common things in our population, in our healthcare system, in our economic conditions, and also with regards to the orientation of general public and general public's response towards this threat. So I think the best initiative which both the governments can and should consider is a mutual cooperation with regards to, that can start with data sharing on the medical developments, the spread of the infection, the methods being tested at various locations. We are using a term smart lockdown these days, and this terminology, smart lockdown, says that we want to locate the infection and we want to isolate it. We want to test it and we want to isolate it. On the other hand, because of the reality that we do not have that kind of economic capacity to take care of every individual who is sitting at home, so we are allowing some kind of economic activity to happen, and we have our governments have written SOPs in line with the recommendations of the World Health Organization and the doctors. So I believe that both the governments can and they must start a mechanism to exchange serious information with regards to COVID combat. We are combating COVID in India, we are combating COVID in Pakistan, and pretty much under the similar circumstances. So why not make it an opportunity? Because for the past 7 decades, all what is selling like hotcake is hate and fear, because hate and fear sells like hotcake. Perhaps this is the time when both the governments can take a break and think more productively and more pragmatically towards the well-being of the people, starting with the medical cooperation and the circumstances, because we have been discussing about this herd immunity, and there is a perception, perhaps someone else also mentioned about that, there is a perception that the living conditions in subcontinent are pretty tough. Therefore, there is a possibility that the people have a better immunity towards anything which is infectious and contagious like COVID-19 is. So why not make it an opportunity to cooperate? Both the governments can cooperate. We can share data. We can share expertise. We can share our success stories. We can share our challenges. We can even share our failures in combating the COVID situation. And perhaps this is one thing which will eventually lead to build that trust which does not exist between these two great nations. We are starved on when it comes to mutual trust. So how can we build the trust? Let's start cooperation on COVID-19. This will eventually build some bridges for time to come. And I'm pretty optimistic that people here in Pakistan, people sitting at the helm of affairs, especially our Prime Minister, Mr. Imran Khan, he himself he enjoys goodwill among the Indian subcontinent, and that goodwill comes from his days of cricketing and days of his philanthropic project, that is Shaukat Khanum Hospital. He has been doing fundraisers, and even the his Indian friends from cricket, from showbiz, they have been a tremendous support to Mr. Imran Khan during these more than 20 years of his struggle against the cancer, which he has been doing, and he has been fundraising with the help of Bollywood stars. So I believe that with Mr. Imran Khan in the driving seat as the Prime Minister of Pakistan, we have an ideal setup. Just trust us. Just give it a shot. Just try to shake hands with confidence. Do not misjudge us. Do not consider that we are on a one-way track to destabilize India. No, we are not. We understand that destabilized neighbors are a threat to each other more than anyone else. So I really don't see anyone interested in Pakistan to destabilize India. Yes, Kashmir is the bone of contention. Yes, the Kashmir issue has to be resolved. But it has to be resolved in due course of time, in line with the UN resolutions and as per the wish and will of the people of Kashmir. Because the Kashmiri people are the key stakeholder of that region. I don't have that much claim on Kashmir. Perhaps you don't have that much claim on Kashmir. But the indigenous people of Kashmir, they are the ones who have the main stake. They are the ones who have been on the suffering end. So let them decide what they want. Let them decide to make a choice. This is very important for the future of this region, not just India, not just Pakistan, not just Mr. Narendra Modi's government, or not even Mr. Imran Khan's government. However, I believe that Mr. Narendra Modi, regardless, the fact that he, from where we see it, how we see it, maybe that's not exactly as accurate as you might have a comprehension about how things work in India. But how we see is that Mr. Modi is pretty much relying on extreme right-wing politics, perhaps which is incentivizing the Hinduvita narrative, which is absolutely against the soul and the spirit of the secular India as it was envisioned by the founding fathers. So this is a big question mark, and this is a question that the Indian people need to ask themselves, that whether they really want to transform away from the secular India as it used to be and convert themselves into, in the 21st century, convert themselves into a Hindu nationalist state that has little acceptance to other religious minorities, especially the Muslim, the Christians, and the scheduled caste people that comprise a big number. I'm not exactly aware and privy to the demography of India, to be precise, in the terms of percentages, but I believe that there is a huge number of population that feel marginalized due to these kind of policies which are being practiced, adopted, and implemented by the current regime of Mr. Narendra Modi. So perhaps you people, the learned ones.
I think we're running out of time. Perhaps you could just wind up.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Since we have crossed 15 minutes past our closing time. Doesn't matter. It's been a wonderful discussion on the first day of Ramzan. A wonderful discussion between India and Pakistan. Some of the best panelists that you could possibly afford to bring together. And it's not for me to summarize, but I think a major takeaway which we can see out here, which almost everyone spoke about, is the fact that it is not going to be the traditional threats that we are going to be dealing with. If you are going to be looking for peace, ultimately you will have to address many other domains of security of both the countries. We cannot keep getting stuck on Kashmir, but if violence continues, if there's sponsored violence from any side, from in our case what we allege as from the Pakistan side coming into Kashmir, then obviously things are not going to take off. I'm glad that we had a very positive exchange of views and ideas, free and frank as much as that could possibly be. I'd like to leave it on a note to which Mr. Raza Sayyed was saying at the end, the various aspects of what's happening in India. You may just remember also to some of my friends from Pakistan that 2015, it's not just the initiative of inviting the Pakistan Prime Minister to the inauguration of Mr. Modi's first government in 2014. In 2015, after a year and about 4 months, Mr. Modi took on the initiative of commencing the in dialogue once again. If you remember UFA, if you remember Bangkok, where our national security advisors met, and then the welcome that you gave to our late Foreign Minister, Minister of External Affairs, Mr. Sushma Swaraj in Islamabad for the Heart of Asia conference, all this was going in the right direction. And Mr. Modi suddenly surprised everyone by landing up in Lahore on the 25th of December in 2015. And somewhere, somehow along the line, this kind of an initiative, this kind of a bonhomie was not acceptable to people somewhere up in Pakistan. And that is how we had Pathankot, and then we had Uri, and we had Nagrota, and that is how the whole thing seems to have got upset. So I leave it at that. I'm not going to make any allegations, etc. We must not leave on a negative note at all. But I do want to say that from India's side also a lot of positivity has emanated, which somehow has not been responded in the right spirit as far as Pakistan is concerned. So with that, thank you so much, General Rakesh Sharma. Thank you so much, Ambassador Raghavan. Thank you, Suhasini. Thank you, Suhasini Hadar. Thank you, General Asad Uddurani, Ambassador Ashraf Jahangir Qazi, Dr. Qamar Chima, and Raza Sayyed Saab. It's been a pleasure to have moderated this webinar. I hope that we have many more of these in the future. Over to you, Aditya. Aditya, I hope you're coming in.
Okay, now is there? Okay, sorry, Aman. Well, thank you so much, General Atta Hasnain sir, for a very well documented and a very well moderated session. We had lovely discussions from both the quarters, from Ambassador Raghavan and then Ashraf Jahangir Qazi Saab, along with General Rakesh Sharma, Suhasini Hadar, and General Durrani, and none other than this, Qamar Chima Saab. And once again, thanks to General Hasnain, and very warm thanks to our lovely audience. Thank you once again, and bye-bye. Thanks. Thank you all.
Good night and Shabbat.
Good night and happy Ramadan.
Thank you, sir. Great experience.